The key slid smoothly into the lock of her own front door. Eleanor Vance hadn't told anyone she was coming home early from her business trip. After 2 demanding months curating art collections across Europe, she wanted nothing more than to surprise her husband, Michael. But as she pushed open the heavy oak door, the real surprise was waiting for her inside. A blonde woman, heavily pregnant, casually cooking dinner in her kitchen, wearing her apron. Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from. After 2 exhausting months navigating the art scenes of Europe, Eleanor had managed to wrap up her exhibition tour a full 3 weeks early. The grueling 16-hour flight from Milan to Chicago had left her utterly drained. But the thought of seeing her husband Michael's face when she walked unexpectedly through the door kept her pushing through the fog of jet lag. Their marriage had certainly weathered its share of challenges over the past 8 years. Michael, a successful investment manager at Continental Trust Bank, had always seemed supportive of Eleanor's career, even when it took her away for weeks, sometimes months, at a time. Together, they had built what Eleanor firmly believed was a solid partnership, childless by mutual choice. They were focused intently on their respective careers, sharing a beautiful home in the affluent suburbs of Chicago that they'd spent years meticulously perfecting. As Eleanor's taxi pulled onto the familiar, tree-lined street of her neighborhood, she felt that deep, comforting sense of relief wash over her. Home, finally. But as the car approached her house, something felt distinctly off. That's strange, Eleanor murmured aloud, noticing a sleek, black BMW she didn't recognize parked squarely in her usual spot in the driveway. Maybe Michael bought a new car? She wondered briefly, but immediately dismissed the thought. Michael would have certainly mentioned such a major purchase during one of their daily calls. As the taxi driver helped her with her luggage, Eleanor noted more jarring discrepancies. The front garden, her carefully planned sanctuary, had been completely redesigned. The meticulously selected hypoallergenic plants she'd insisted on due to her severe allergies had vanished, replaced with vibrant, blooming hydrangeas. Beautiful, yes, but precisely the type of flowers her immunologist had explicitly warned her to avoid. The exterior lighting had been changed too. The warm, golden sconces that had taken them months to source from an artisan in Vermont were gone, replaced with harsh, modern blue LED fixtures that gave the classic colonial-style home an oddly cold and clinical appearance. Maybe he's planning a surprise renovation, Eleanor thought, trying to rationalize the changes, though the tightening knot in her stomach suggested otherwise. Eleanor paid the driver and wheeled her heavy suitcase up the walkway to the front door. That's when she heard unfamiliar music drifting through the windows. It wasn't Michael's preferred smooth jazz or her own curated classical compilations, but pulsing electronic dance music that seemed entirely out of character for their normally quiet household. Using her key, Eleanor entered quietly. The entryway hit her with another visceral shock. The carefully curated gallery wall, featuring cherished photographs from their travels together, had been completely replaced with large, aggressive abstract prints in garish neon colors, precisely the style of art she had professionally critiqued as soulless commercial work in her last published review. "Michael?" she called out, hearing her voice crack slightly with uncertainty. No answer came over the pulsing beat of the music. Eleanor moved deeper into the house, wheeling her suitcase behind her, each room she passed showing further evidence of a startling transformation. Their serene, neutral-toned living room now featured a massive, vibrant purple sectional sofa, replacing their beloved vintage leather couch. The built-in bookshelves had been cleared of Michael's treasured history books and her valuable art volumes. They now displayed purely decorative objects and very few actual books. As Eleanor approached the kitchen, the smell of unfamiliar, pungent spices grew stronger. She pushed open the swinging door and froze. Standing at her professional-grade range. A generous housewarming gift from her parents. Was a woman Eleanor had never seen before. She was tall and slender, except for a prominent, rounded baby bump. The woman had platinum blonde hair pulled back into a messy, but undeniably stylish bun. She wore Eleanor's vintage Italian apron, the one Eleanor's own grandmother had given her, stretched awkwardly over her pregnant belly. For what seemed like an eternity, Eleanor stood silent, rooted to the spot, desperately trying to process the surreal scene. The woman hadn't noticed her yet, humming along to the intrusive music as she stirred something simmering in Eleanor's expensive copper cookware. Then, as if sensing a presence, the woman turned. Eleanor expected shock, embarrassment, perhaps even panic at being discovered. Instead, the blonde woman's perfectly made-up face registered only mild surprise before settling into a practiced, almost insincere smile. "You must be Eleanor," the woman said calmly, placing the wooden spoon neatly on the spoon rest beside the stove. "Michael said you wouldn't be back for another 3 weeks." Eleanor felt as if the floor had completely disappeared beneath her feet. The casual tone, the nonchalant knowledge of her schedule, the disturbingly comfortable way this stranger occupied her space, it all suggested something far deeper and more insidious than a brief, regrettable indiscretion. "Who are you?" Eleanor managed to ask, her voice barely audible over the music still pulsing through the house's integrated speaker system. "And what are you doing in my home?" The woman reached for the tablet resting on the counter and turned down the music with a flick of a perfectly manicured finger. The sudden relative quiet felt even more unsettling, amplifying the tension in the room. "I'm Chloe," the woman replied, resting one hand proprietorially on her baby bump in what seemed like a deliberately protective gesture. "Chloe Bennett. Michael didn't mention I'd be here, did he?" A small, knowing smile played across her perfectly painted lips. That's so typical of him, always putting things off until the last minute. Eleanor's mind raced, desperately scrambling through possibilities, each one worse than the last. A relative needing somewhere to stay? No. Michael was an only child, and his parents had retired to Florida years ago. A friend in some kind of trouble? But why would she speak with such chilling familiarity? Such an air of belonging? "I don't understand," Eleanor said, fighting to keep her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. "Where is Michael? Why are you in our house? What's happening here?" Chloe tilted her head slightly, her expression shifting to one of practiced sympathy that never quite reached her cold blue eyes. "Oh dear," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "This is going to be even more awkward than I thought." Chloe turned back to the stove, stirring whatever was in the pot with an air of complete ownership that made Eleanor's blood boil. The woman was acting as if Eleanor was the intruder in her own home. "Michael will be home in about an hour," Chloe continued, her tone infuriatingly conversational, as if discussing the weather. "He's our parenting class. Tuesday nights. You know." Eleanor's legs felt weak, unsteady. She pulled out one of the kitchen chairs new, like so much else in the house, and sat down heavily, still clad in her rumpled travel clothes. "I think you need to explain exactly what's going on," Eleanor demanded, finding a sliver of strength in her rising anger. "Now." Chloe sighed dramatically, turning down the heat on the stove before finally facing Eleanor fully. Her hand returned to her baby bump in what Eleanor was beginning to recognize as a calculated, almost theatrical gesture. "This really is awkward timing," Chloe said, leaning casually against the gleaming quartz countertop. "Michael and I were planning to call you next week. He's been meaning to tell you for months." "Really? But, well, with the baby coming in just 8 weeks, we just couldn't wait any longer." She glanced around the newly transformed kitchen with a proprietary air that grated on Eleanor's nerves. "I'm afraid you've rather interrupted our nesting phase." The casual cruelty of the statement, nesting phase, hit Eleanor like a physical blow, as if this strange woman and Michael were a cozy pair of birds, building a home together in the very house Eleanor had helped design, furnish, and pay for. How long? Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How long what? Chloe asked, feigning innocence. How long have Michael and I been together? Or how long have I been living here? Eleanor just stared, unable to form words. We've been seeing each other for almost 18 months. Chloe clarified, seemingly enjoying Eleanor's shock. I moved in. She paused, pretending to count on her fingers. About 6 weeks ago, right after you left for Europe. 18 months. 6 weeks. The numbers pounded relentlessly in Eleanor's head. She and Michael had celebrated their 8th wedding anniversary just 4 months ago with a romantic weekend trip to Napa Valley. Had he already been deeply involved with this woman then? Had he been living a complete double life all this time? I don't believe you, Eleanor said, though a sickening part of her already did. The drastic changes to the house. The comfortable, assured way Chloe navigated the space, it all suggested her story, however unbelievable, was horrifyingly true. Chloe shrugged, returning her attention to her cooking as if dismissing Eleanor entirely. Believe what you want. Michael will confirm everything when he gets home. She opened Eleanor's spice cabinet, now meticulously reorganized with labels facing outward in precise alphabetical order, and selected a jar. He's been unhappy for years. Eleanor, all these long business trips you take, while I've been right here, giving him what he really wants. A family. Her eyes met Eleanor's in the reflection of the stainless steel refrigerator. We're expecting a son. The deliberate emphasis on the word son felt like another calculated wound. Eleanor and Michael had discussed children early in their marriage and had mutually decided, or so Eleanor had believed, to focus on their demanding careers. I want you out of my house, Eleanor said, standing up abruptly, her voice gaining strength. Now, before Michael gets back. Chloe laughed. A light, tinkling sound that grated on Eleanor's already frayed nerves. Oh, honey, that's not how this works, she replied condescendingly. This is Michael's house too, you know, and he wants me here. She stirred the pot again, the metallic scrape echoing in the tense silence. Besides, I've been managing things while you've been gone. Bills, maintenance, everything. Ask Michael, if you don't believe me. Eleanor's mind raced. She needed to see more, to understand the full extent of this invasion, this violation of her life. I'm going to go freshen up, she said stiffly, needing a moment alone to think, to breathe. Sure, Chloe replied, waving a dismissive hand towards the hallway. Your things have been moved to the guest room. By the way, we've been using the master bedroom. Of course. The casual, almost boastful statement sent another wave of nausea through Eleanor. She left her suitcase standing awkwardly in the kitchen and moved numbly through the house, taking inventory of the devastating changes. The home office, her personal sanctuary where she'd written catalog essays and organized complex international exhibitions, had been completely transformed into a nursery. Pale blue walls, an elaborate, expensive-looking crib, and a cloying mural of woodland animals had replaced her custom-built desk. Her meticulously organized files, and her treasured art books. A framed ultrasound image hung prominently on the wall, with Baby Mitchell written beneath it in a flowing, feminine script. In the hallway, Eleanor noticed something else missing the photographs. Every single framed picture of her and Michael together had vanished. In their place were photos of Michael with Chloe, the two of them hiking, laughing at a baseball game, posing together at what appeared to be a recent baby shower, surrounded by people Eleanor didn't recognize. The master bedroom was the final, crushing blow. The sanctuary she had so carefully created with Michael. a space meant for intimacy and rest, was completely transformed. Their minimalist platform bed had been replaced with a large, traditional sleigh bed. The serene, neutral palette Eleanor had painstakingly chosen was now a bold, almost aggressive navy and white scheme. Chloe's clothes expensive. Trendy labels filled the closet space Eleanor had left half empty. On Michael's nightstand sat a stack of pregnancy books and another sonogram photo, nestled in a silver frame that read Daddy's Little MVP. Eleanor's legs finally gave out, and she sank onto the edge of the bed, their bed. That was no longer theirs. She pulled out her phone, instinctively wanting to call Michael, to scream at him, to demand answers. But as she scrolled to his contact, she realized with a growing sense of dread that his last text was from 3 days ago, containing nothing but bland reassurances about his week and perfunctory questions about her exhibition. Eleanor dialed his number. After 3 rings, an automated voice informed her curtly that the number was no longer in service. Returning to the kitchen in a daze, Eleanor held up her phone. Michael's number isn't working. Chloe looked up from setting the dining table with new, unfamiliar dinnerware. Eleanor noted numbly. "Oh, right. He changed his number last month," she said casually, as if discussing something utterly trivial. "Too many work calls during off hours." He said, "Here, use mine." She held out her sleek smartphone, opened her contacts list, where Michael Red Heart was prominently displayed at the top. Eleanor didn't take the offered phone. Instead, she noticed Chloe had set the table meticulously for 2, not 3. "I assume I'm not welcome for dinner?" Eleanor said, her voice hollow, devoid of emotion. "Well, this is rather unexpected," Chloe replied smoothly, her practiced smile firmly back in place. "We hadn't planned on you being here. Obviously, Michael will probably want to talk to you privately when he gets home. I'm sure. Perhaps you could go out and get something to eat. Give us some space to figure out how to handle this situation." The sheer audacity of being asked to leave her own home, to give her husband and his pregnant girlfriend space, was almost laughable. Almost. "I'm not going anywhere," Eleanor said firmly, the steely resolve surprising even herself. "This is my house." Chloe's pleasant facade finally cracked slightly, revealing a flash of sharp annoyance before she quickly composed herself again. "Actually, it's both of yours, isn't it? Which means Michael has every right to invite me to live here." She placed a hand protectively on her belly again, for the baby's sake. Just then, the doorbell rang loudly, startling them both. "Oh, that's probably the delivery," Chloe said brightly, moving swiftly toward the front door. "We ordered a new rocking chair for the nursery." As Chloe disappeared into the hallway, Eleanor quickly moved to the large kitchen island. Her meticulously organized system of drawers had been completely rearranged, but in the 3rd drawer, beneath a pile of unfamiliar table linens, she found what she was looking for, the file containing important house documents. She quickly rifled through, confirming that at least their mortgage paperwork seemed unchanged, still bearing both their names. From the entryway, she could hear Chloe signing for a delivery, her voice cheerful and completely at ease. This woman had thoroughly and calculatingly embedded herself in Eleanor's life, with apparently no reservations or guilt whatsoever. Eleanor's phone vibrated with an incoming text message. It was from Jessica Hayes, her best friend since college, who also happened to work as a compliance officer at Continental Trust Bank, alongside Michael. "Hey, heard you might be back early? Tried your house phone, but no answer. Need to talk to you ASAP about Michael. Something weird is going on with the Henderson account. Call me urgently." Before Eleanor could even process the alarming message, she heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the kitchen window, she saw Michael's familiar silver Audi parking neatly beside the black BMW. Her husband was home. Eleanor felt a strange, Icy calm settled over her. After the initial shock, the hurt, and the disbelief, she now wanted answers. More than that, she needed them. She squared her shoulders, took a deep breath, and waited. The front door opened, and Eleanor heard the familiar clatter of Michael's keys dropping into the ceramic bowl in the entryway, except, she noted absently, the bowl itself had been replaced with something new, something modern and impersonal. Babe, that rocker got delivered, but they sent the wrong damn color. I told them specifically we needed the... Michael's voice trailed off abruptly as he rounded the corner into the kitchen and saw Eleanor standing there, rigid, by the island. For a brief, unguarded moment, genuine shock registered clearly on his face. His mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air, and the healthy color drained rapidly from his features. Then, as if a mask had abruptly slipped into place, his expression shifted instantaneously to one of practiced, cautious concern. "Eleanor," he said, his voice carefully modulated, betraying none of the initial surprise. "You're back early." Michael Vance had always been handsome in a conventional, clean-cut way. He had an athletic build maintained through regular early morning tennis matches. Sandy brown hair always cut in an expensive but conservative style, and blue eyes that crinkled appealingly when he smiled. At 42, he looked younger than his age, especially dressed casually in the polo shirt and khakis he wore now after work. But as Eleanor studied the man she'd been married to for 8 long years, she realized with a chilling certainty that she was seeing him clearly for perhaps the very first time. The subtle way his eyes darted nervously between her and Chloe, the slight, almost imperceptible tension in his jawline, the calculated distance he maintained, standing demonstrably closer to Chloe than to his own wife. "Obviously," Eleanor replied coolly, her voice steady. "Ife a mit Chloe." Michael nodded slowly, deliberately moving to stand directly beside the pregnant woman. His hand automatically went to the small of Chloe's back in an intimate, possessive gesture that told Eleanor everything she needed to know about the true nature of their relationship. "I was going to tell you, when you got back," Michael said, his tone sounding rehearsed, almost robotic. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." "Find out what? Exactly, Michael?" Eleanor asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "That you moved your pregnant girlfriend into our home while I was away working? That you've completely redecorated the entire house without breathing a word to me? That you've changed your phone number and didn't bother to tell your wife? Which specific part were you planning to eventually get around to telling me?" Michael exchanged a quick, tense look with Chloe before answering, his gaze avoiding Eleanor's. "All of it. Eleanor, I know this is a shock, but Chloe and I, it just happened. We're in love." The utter cliché of it was almost worse than the betrayal itself. It just happened, as if an 18-month affair resulting in a supposed pregnancy was some sort of unavoidable natural disaster, an event that couldn't possibly have been prevented. "When did you plan to tell me?" Eleanor pressed, refusing to let him off the hook. "Chloe says you've been seeing each other for a year and a half. That's half the time I was working tirelessly on the European exhibition, the exhibition which, by the way, you strongly encouraged me to take on." A flash of something guilt? Annoyance? Crossed Michael's face before he smoothed it over. "I was trying to find the right time." "The right time?" Eleanor repeated flatly, incredulously. "And that would have been when? Exactly? After the baby was born? On your first anniversary? Perhaps?" Michael's jaw tightened visibly. "This isn't productive. Eleanor, what's done is done. We need to talk about next steps." "Next steps?" Eleanor echoed, feeling like a bewildered parrot repeating phrases that made absolutely no sense in the context of her shattered reality. "Yes," Michael said briskly, moving towards the dining room table where his expensive leather briefcase sat. He opened it and removed a thick manila folder. I've had papers drawn up. A divorce settlement. It's fair to everyone involved. Eleanor stared at him in utter disbelief. You've already prepared divorce papers? It's better this way, Michael insisted, laying the documents squarely on the table between them. A clean break. You get to keep focusing on your career, and Chloe and I can focus on our family. The casual, almost dismissive cruelty of his words hit Eleanor anew. 8 years of marriage. Dismissed so easily, so clinically. I need you to sign these tonight. Michael continued, his tone becoming more clipped, more businesslike. My attorney advised that we resolve this quickly, for everyone's benefit. Tonight? Eleanor asked, incredulous. You expect me to sign divorce papers tonight? Without even reading them thoroughly? Without consulting my own attorney? Michael's expression hardened slightly. It's a generous settlement. Eleanor, you get to keep your art collection, your personal investments. I'm not trying to take advantage of you. Eleanor slowly approached the table and glanced down at the papers without touching them. Even from a cursory look, she could see it was far more complex than just simple divorce papers. There were multiple documents related to their joint accounts, the house itself, and something alarming pertaining to the Henderson family trust. Why are there documents about my family's foundation in here? Eleanor asked, a cold suspicion beginning to bloom in her chest. Just formalizing the separation of our financial interests. Michael said smoothly, perhaps a little too smoothly. You know, I've been helping manage some of the Henderson investments. This just clarifies that I'll no longer have any involvement. Something didn't add up. Michael had indeed offered some investment advice for her family's charitable foundation over the years, but he never had signing authority or direct access to those accounts. Eleanor's phone vibrated again in her pocket. Another urgent text from Jessica. Don't sign anything. Something is seriously wrong with the Henderson account. Call me ASAP. Eleanor glanced up sharply to see both Michael and Chloe watching her intently. Their expressions strangely synchronized. I need time to review these, Eleanor said, buying herself a precious moment, trying to keep her voice even. And I absolutely need to speak with my own attorney first. There's no time for that, Michael insisted, his voice taking on a hard edge she'd rarely heard before. I need you to sign these papers, Eleanor, and then you need to move out, as soon as possible, for the baby's sake. There was again, for the baby's sake, as if an unborn, possibly fictitious, child somehow entitled them to her home, her assets, and rushed, legally questionable proceedings. Move out? Eleanor repeated, shaking her head in disbelief. This is my house too. Michael, my name is on the mortgage, on the deed. Where exactly do you expect me to go tonight? You can stay at a hotel for a few days. Chloe interjected quickly, her voice regaining its smooth composure. Just until you find a more permanent arrangement. We've already packed some of your essential items. She gestured toward a suitcase Eleanor hadn't noticed before, sitting ominously by the kitchen door. The rest of your things are in storage. You pack my things? Eleanor felt her carefully constructed composure finally slipping. You put my personal possessions in storage without my permission? We needed the space, Michael said unapologetically, his gaze defiant. For the nursery and Chloe's things. This is insane, Eleanor said, shaking her head, feeling trapped in a nightmare. You can't just erase me from my own life and expect me to simply cooperate. Be reasonable, Eleanor, Michael said, his tone becoming infuriatingly patronizing. This situation is difficult for everyone. The sooner we resolve it, the better. As Michael spoke, Eleanor noticed Chloe moving casually toward the kitchen island where her designer purse sat. The blonde woman nonchalantly removed something that looked like a bottle of prescription medication, swallowing a pill quickly with a glass of water. What's that? Eleanor asked, momentarily distracted, grasping at any detail that felt out of place. Prenatal vitamins, Chloe answered smoothly, meeting Eleanor's gaze without flinching. Doctor's orders. Michael placed a pen firmly on top of the stack of papers. Eleanor, please, just sign the documents. Then you can go, and we can all start moving forward. I'm not signing anything tonight, Eleanor said firmly, meeting his gaze directly. And I'm not leaving my house. Michael's expression darkened ominously. You're making this much more difficult than it needs to be. Am I? Eleanor countered, finding strength in her anger. You've been having an affair for over a year. Moved another woman who might be pregnant, or might not be into our home. Changed the locks on my office. Disposed of my personal belongings without my consent. And prepared complex legal documents I've never seen before. But I'm the one making things difficult? You were never here. Michael suddenly snapped, his own composure finally cracking under the strain. Always off at some gallery opening, or some exhibition, or some damned auction. What did you expect? I expected fidelity. Michael, Eleanor replied coldly, her voice cutting through the tension. It's generally considered a basic component of marriage. Michael laughed, a short, bitter sound devoid of any humor. Marriage requires presence. Eleanor, you chose your career over our relationship years ago. That's not fair, Eleanor protested, stung by the accusation. We agreed on our priorities together. You encouraged my career. Things change, Michael said dismissively, glancing possessively at Chloe. People change. I want a family. Eleanor, something you were never interested in providing. Before Eleanor could respond, her phone rang loudly in her pocket. Jessica again. Eleanor knew, with absolute certainty, that she needed to take this call. I need to use the bathroom, she said abruptly, turning away. The powder room is being renovated, Chloe said quickly, almost too quickly. Use the guest bath upstairs. Eleanor nodded curtly and headed for the stairs, feeling both Michael's and Chloe's intense eyes burning into her back. Once inside the guest bathroom, also completely redecorated in a style she didn't recognize and actively disliked, Eleanor locked the door securely and answered the call, her heart pounding against her ribs. Jessica? What's going on? She whispered urgently. Eleanor. Thank God. Jessica's voice came through, tense with worry. Where are you? Are you at the house? Yes. And you won't believe what I just walked into, Eleanor began, her voice trembling. Listen to me, Eleanor. Jessica cut her off sharply. Do not sign anything Michael gives you. Don't agree to anything. There's something seriously wrong. What do you mean? Eleanor asked, the cold suspicion she'd felt earlier crystallizing instantly into sheer dread. Michael's been making unauthorized transactions, Jessica explained rapidly, her words tumbling out in a rush. From the Henderson Foundation accounts. He somehow got access to the signature authority protocols, we think maybe through forged documents or exploiting a system loophole. He's been systematically moving large sums of money offshore for months. Eleanor felt the room spin violently around her. How much? At least $2 million that we can trace so far, Jessica said grimly. And Eleanor, that's not all. That woman he's with, Chloe Bennett? She's not who she claims to be. Eleanor sank down onto the edge of the bathtub, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. What do you mean? She's not who she claims to be, Eleanor whispered, keeping her voice low despite the running water she'd turned on in the sink for privacy. Her name isn't Chloe Bennett, Jessica explained urgently. It's Elizabeth Kaplan. She's a known financial fraudster. Eleanor. She's been investigated for remarkably similar schemes in Boston, Miami, and Seattle. She specifically targets wealthy individuals, especially those with access to family money or large investment accounts. Eleanor's mind raced, pieces clicking into place with sickening, horrifying clarity. Michael's sudden insistence on her taking the extended European assignment, the conveniently timed pregnancy announcement, the extreme urgency to get her signature on those papers tonight. The pregnancy. Eleanor breathed. Is it even real? Based on her previous MO? Probably not. Jessica replied grimly. In the Seattle case, she wore a prosthetic pregnancy belly the entire time to gain sympathy from her Mark's family. Created a whole elaborate story about carrying twins. Eleanor instantly recalled the oddly protective way Chloe kept touching her belly. How she conveniently popped those prenatal vitamins right in front of her. How do you know all this? Eleanor asked, still reeling. After I noticed the suspicious transfers from the Henderson accounts a few weeks ago, I flagged it internally for compliance. Jessica explained. They've been quietly building a case. I wasn't supposed to tell you, yet they were worried about tipping Michael and her off. But when you texted that you were home early, I knew you were walking right into something potentially dangerous. Dangerous? Eleanor felt a chill snake down her spine despite the steam filling the small bathroom. Do you think they would actually hurt me? I don't know. Eleanor, Jessica admitted honestly. But in the Seattle case, when the victim refused to cooperate, valuable artwork and jewelry mysteriously disappeared from their home just before Kaplan vanished. In Miami, the victim's identity was completely stolen after they signed what they thought were innocent-looking divorce documents. These people are professionals. They're trying to get me to sign papers tonight, Eleanor said, the full, terrifying scope of the situation finally becoming terrifyingly clear. Not just divorce papers. Documents related to the Henderson Foundation. Don't sign anything. Eleanor, Jessica emphasized again, her voice sharp with urgency. The FBI has already been notified. They're involved. The FBI? Eleanor repeated, stunned. Yes, because the Foundation's accounts cross state lines. It automatically becomes federal jurisdiction. Jessica explained quickly. Eleanor, I need you to stay calm and just stall them. Can you do that? Just find excuses not to sign anything or leave the house until help arrives. How long? Eleanor asked, glancing at her watch. It was just past 7 p.m. I don't know exactly, but soon. Jessica promised. They were already monitoring the situation closely. Knowing you're actually there, in the house with them, will accelerate their timeline significantly. Eleanor took a deep, steadying breath. Okay, she could do this. Okay, she said, her voice firmer now. I'll stall. Be careful. Eleanor, Jessica warned. Michael's been moving money for months. They're not amateurs. They're desperate. After ending the call, Eleanor stared intently at her reflection in the steam-streaked mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger travel-worn. Shocked, utterly betrayed. But underneath the hurt and the confusion, Eleanor felt something else emerging, hardening within her, determination. This wasn't just about Michael's infidelity anymore. As devastating as that was, this was calculated fraud, large-scale theft, and they were brazenly trying to use her to gain access to her family's cherished charitable foundation money dedicated specifically to arts education for underprivileged children. Eleanor splashed cold water on her face, ran her fingers quickly through her tangled hair, and steeled herself for what was to come. She had to keep them talking, keep them believing she might eventually cooperate, just until help arrived. Downstairs, she found Michael and Chloe engaged in what appeared to be a hushed, tense conversation that stopped abruptly the moment she entered the room. Everything okay? Michael asked, his voice overly casual, his forced nonchalance grating on her nerves, as well as can be expected under the circumstances. Eleanor replied evenly, moving purposefully toward the dining table where the sinister stack of papers still lay. I've been thinking about what you said. Michael and Chloe exchange another quick, almost imperceptible glance, one that Eleanor now recognized as calculating rather than intimate. And Michael prompted, "Try to sound patient. I need to fully understand exactly what I'm signing," Eleanor said, pulling out a chair and sitting down deliberately. "Walk me through these documents again." Slowly. Relief flashed visibly across Michael's face. "Of course," he said quickly, clearly believing she was finally caving. "That's perfectly reasonable." He sat down across from her, pulling the stack of papers closer. "As I mentioned, it's a straightforward divorce settlement." Eleanor nodded, pretending to listen intently, watching him carefully as he flipped to the first page. For the next 20 minutes, Michael meticulously explained the documents, or rather, the carefully curated version of the documents he wanted her to believe existed. He spoke smoothly of equitable distribution of marital assets, her retention of personal property, his assumption of the mortgage debt. What he conveniently didn't explain, and what Eleanor could now clearly see with her heightened awareness, were the complex, legally dense clauses transferring signing authority on specific accounts, granting broad powers of attorney for financial decisions, and including alarming authorizations related to the Henderson Foundation's substantial investment portfolio. In this section here, Eleanor asked, pointing deliberately to a paragraph buried deep in the middle of page 17, about the transfer of management responsibilities for existing philanthropic endeavors. Michael barely glanced at it. "Oh, that's just formalizing that I'll no longer be advising on the Henderson Foundation investments. As we discussed, you'll retain full control." Naturally, a blatant lie. The clause, as written, actually authorized Michael Vance to act as a designated agent on behalf of the foundation for a period of 3 full years. "I see," Eleanor said slowly, turning to the next page. "And what about our art collection? I don't see it mentioned specifically anywhere." "It's covered under personal property," Michael assured her quickly. "You keep your pieces, I keep mine. Fair division." Another lie. A separate, ancillary document tucked deeper in the stack, which he hadn't explicitly shown her yet, included a detailed inventory of high-value art assets and their immediate transfer to a newly formed LLC, one that Eleanor suspected she would have absolutely no actual control over. As Eleanor continued to ask pointed questions, deliberately drawing out the process, she noticed Chloe growing increasingly anxious. The blonde woman checked her watch repeatedly and kept glancing nervously at her phone, which buzzed silently on the table beside her. "Is there somewhere you need to be?" Eleanor asked innocently, directing the question at Chloe. "No," Chloe said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "No, just checking the time. It's getting late. That's all." Michael shot Chloe a sharp warning look before turning back to Eleanor with a tight, forced smile. "We have plenty of time to go through this properly. Eleanor, I want you to feel completely comfortable with everything." Eleanor nodded, pretending to read another page carefully, her eyes scanning the dense legal text. "This section mentions an offshore account. In the Cayman Islands? We don't have any offshore accounts." Michael. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face before he quickly masked it. "That's just standard legal boilerplate language. Eleanor, it's just covering all potential bases for assets disclosure. Standard legal language for accounts he'd likely already established to funnel stolen money from her family's foundation." "I see," Eleanor murmured again, turning another page with deliberate slowness. "And these specific investment account numbers listed here, I don't recognize some of these." "Those are the Henderson Foundation accounts," Michael explained smoothly. "They're just included for reference only, to clearly show they remain separate from our personal marital assets. Included for reference, with signature lines conveniently placed below, authorizing their administrative control." Eleanor checked her watch discreetly. Almost an hour had passed since she'd spoken to Jessica. How much longer would she need to stall these two? I think I need something to drink before we continue, Eleanor said suddenly, standing up. This is a lot to process. I'll get you some water, Chloe offered quickly, starting to rise from her chair. Actually, I prefer wine, Eleanor replied coolly. There should still be some Merlot left in the cellar, unless you replace that too. Michael and Chloe exchanged another tense look. I'm afraid we don't keep alcohol in the house anymore, Michael said stiffly. Because of the baby? Of course. Of course. The non-existent baby that served as their entire flimsy pretext. Water is fine then, Eleanor conceded, watching closely as Chloe moved towards the large stainless steel refrigerator. As Chloe reached up high to retrieve a glass from an upper cabinet, Eleanor noticed something distinctly odd. The woman's perfectly rounded, pregnant belly shifted slightly, unnaturally, to one side in a way that no real pregnancy would ever allow. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable to Eleanor's now hyper-suspicious eyes. Jessica had been right. The pregnancy was entirely fake. Chloe handed Eleanor the glass of water, and their eyes met for a brief, charged moment. Eleanor thought she detected a flicker of genuine concern, perhaps even fear, in the other woman's gaze, as if sensing Eleanor's growing awareness, her dawning comprehension. Thank you, Eleanor said, taking a deliberate sip, her mind racing. So, Michael, she began, turning back to him, you mentioned I would need to move out tonight. Where exactly are my things? You said storage, but which facility? Safekeep, over on Riverside Drive. Michael answered readily. Everything's in a climate-controlled unit. I have the access information right here in my office. Eleanor nodded slowly, wondering if her cherished belongings were actually there, or if that was yet another calculated lie. And my family photos? The albums from my parents? My grandmother's jewelry? She asked, knowing these irreplaceable items would be particularly valuable and tragically easy to sell off. All safely stored, Michael assured her smoothly, though his eyes didn't quite meet hers this time. We were very careful with your personal items, Eleanor. Eleanor set down her water glass with a deliberate, resonant click on the tabletop. You know what I find interesting, Michael? You keep saying we pack your things. We needed the space. We were careful, as if Chloe suddenly has equal say in what happens to my possessions in my home. Michael's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Chloe is going to be my wife. Eleanor. She's carrying my child. Of course I include her in decisions. Your wife? Eleanor repeated, arching an eyebrow. You haven't even filed for divorce yet. But she's already your wife? She's my wife in all the ways that truly matter, Michael replied coldly, his voice devoid of warmth. Eleanor turned her gaze directly to Chloe, who had been watching their exchange with a kind of calculated, almost unnerving attentiveness. How far along did you say you were? Chloe? 8 months? 32 weeks. Chloe confirmed smoothly, one hand automatically moving to rest protectively on her prosthetic belly. That's interesting, Eleanor said casually, leaning back slightly in her chair. Because exactly 8 months ago, Michael and I were in Napa Valley, celebrating our 8th anniversary. He didn't happen to mention he had a pregnant girlfriend back home then. Chloe's expression didn't waver for a second. I wasn't pregnant then. We've only known about the baby for about 5 months. I see. Eleanor nodded slowly, as if accepting this flimsy explanation. So you got pregnant after knowing each other for, what, roughly a year? That seems rather fast. When you know, Chloe replied with practiced, saccharine serenity. Enough about the timeline. Michael interrupted sharply, clearly uncomfortable with this line of questioning. Let's just get back to the documents. If we can finish signing tonight, you can take the executed copies with you. Take them where? Exactly, Michael? Eleanor asked pointedly. You still haven't actually told me where I'm supposed to go at. She checked her watch deliberately. At nearly 9 o'clock at night. The Four Seasons has availability. Michael said quickly, a little too quickly. I checked this afternoon. They can accommodate you for as long as needed. How thoughtful, Eleanor said dryly, her voice laced with sarcasm. You checked hotel availability for me before I even knew I needed a hotel. Michael's patience was visibly wearing thin now, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. Eleanor, please, just sign the papers. You can have your attorney review everything afterward if you're still concerned. But I need these signatures tonight. Why the extreme rush? Michael? Eleanor pressed, refusing to back down. If this is all above board and fair, as you keep claiming, why does it absolutely have to happen right now? Michael glanced nervously at Chloe before answering. My attorney strongly advised completing this as quickly as possible. 4. For clean closure. Your attorney advised getting signatures on complex financial documents without allowing time for independent legal review? Eleanor asked skeptically, raising an eyebrow. That seems highly unlikely for any reputable lawyer I know. Michael's expression hardened completely. You're being difficult on purpose. No, Michael, I'm being cautious. Eleanor corrected him sharply. Which seems entirely reasonable when my husband of 8 years ambushes me with divorce papers and a pregnant girlfriend all in the span of one evening. Chloe suddenly stepped forward, her voice taking on a harder, more impatient edge than before. Michael, this isn't working. She's obviously not going to sign tonight. She will, Michael insisted, turning back forcefully to Eleanor. Look, I've been more than patient. I've explained everything clearly. I've offered a generous settlement. I've even arranged luxury accommodation for you. What more do you possibly want? Time, Eleanor said simply, holding his gaze. Time to process this unbelievable betrayal. Time to review these documents properly. Time to consult my own attorney. We don't have time. Michael snapped, his mask slipping further, revealing the desperation underneath. These need to be executed tonight. Why? Eleanor challenged directly. What happens at midnight? Michael, do you both turn into pumpkins? Chloe's hand closed urgently around Michael's arm in a clear warning gesture. Michael, enough. We can revisit this tomorrow. But Michael shook her off impatiently, leaning aggressively across the table toward Eleanor. Sign the papers. Eleanor. Now, or things will become much less pleasant. Eleanor felt a genuine chill at his menacing tone, but maintained her outward composure. Are you threatening me, Michael? I'm stating facts, he replied coldly, his eyes hard. You can make this easy, or you can make this very, very difficult. Your choice. As the tension in the room crackled, Eleanor noticed Chloe checking her phone again, typing something quickly with her thumbs before hastily putting it away. The woman's nervousness was becoming more palpable by the minute. Just then, Eleanor's own phone vibrated silently in her pocket with another incoming text. Glancing down discreetly, she saw Jessica's name and a simple, heart-stopping message, ETA 15 minutes. 15 minutes. She just needed to stall them a little longer. Let me think about this, Eleanor said slowly, picking up the thick stack of papers again and leafing through them as if genuinely reconsidering her position. If I sign tonight, what exactly happens next? Michael seemed to relax slightly, clearly believing she was finally cooperating. You'll take these executed copies with you to the Four Seasons tonight. Tomorrow, the financial transfers will be processed through our respective attorneys. By the end of the week, everything will be officially separated. And the house? Eleanor asked quietly. When would I need to formally move out? Technically, The agreement gives you 30 days. Michael replied quickly. But given the circumstances, sooner would obviously be better for everyone involved. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. And my personal items? At this storage facility? I'd have immediate access? Of course. Michael assured her readily. I'll text you the unit number and the access code tomorrow. Not tonight. Tomorrow. Another glaring red flag. In my car? Eleanor continued, thinking aloud. It's still in long-term parking at O'Hare. I can have someone pick it up for you. Michael offered eagerly, sensing victory was near. Just give me the parking details. That's very thoughtful, Eleanor said, forcing a small, tight smile. And the Henderson Foundation? How would the management transition work there? Michael hesitated, almost imperceptibly. There's no transition needed. Eleanor, as I said, those accounts remain entirely under your control. Another blatant lie. The documents clearly indicated otherwise. I see, Eleanor murmured, turning another page slowly. Chloe, meanwhile, had moved restlessly to the kitchen window, peering out intently at the dark street with poorly concealed anxiety. She checked her watch again before catching Eleanor watching her, just wondering if the rain is going to hold off. Chloe explained unconvincingly, gesturing vaguely outside. The forecast mentioned possible storms tonight. The sky had been perfectly clear when Eleanor arrived, and she'd heard nothing about impending rain, but she nodded curtly as if accepting the flimsy explanation. Michael, Eleanor said, returning her attention to her husband, trying one final delaying tactic. If I were to sign these tonight, I want to make one small change. This clause here, about the Henderson Foundation investments, I prefer to remove it entirely, since you keep saying it's not relevant anyway. Michael's expression tightened instantly. The documents are a package. Eleanor, my attorney prepared them specifically to be comprehensive. Removing sections could potentially invalidate the whole agreement. I don't see how removing a supposedly irrelevant clause would invalidate anything. Eleanor pressed calmly. If it's just standard language. As you claimed earlier. Let's not complicate things. Eleanor, Michael insisted firmly, his patience clearly gone. The papers are ready as they stand. Eleanor deliberately set down the documents and leaned back slowly in her chair, crossing her arms. I think I need more time to consider all this. It's a lot to process in one evening. Michael's mask of forced patience finally slipped completely. Damn it. Eleanor, just sign the fucking papers. The raw outburst hung heavily in the suddenly silent air between them. Chloe hurried back from the window, placing a warning hand on Michael's tense shoulder. Michael, she murmured urgently, calm down. But Michael shrugged her off violently, standing abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. We don't have time for this. I've been patient. I've explained everything. I've been more than generous. Generous? Eleanor repeated incredulously, standing up slowly to face him, her voice ringing with newfound strength. You've been systematically stealing millions of dollars from my family's charitable foundation. Michael, that's not generosity. It's a federal crime. The statement landed like a bomb in the tense room. Michael froze, his face contorted in disbelief. Chloe's carefully maintained composure cracked completely, shattering like fragile glass. What? What did you just say? Michael finally asked, his voice deadly quiet, laced with menace. You heard me, Eleanor replied steadily, standing her ground. I know about the unauthorized transfers. Michael, I know about the offshore accounts you've set up. Did you really think no one at the bank would notice $3? $2 million simply disappearing? Michael and Chloe exchanged panicked, wide-eyed looks. You don't know what you're talking about. Michael blustered, but his voice lacked conviction, his face paling rapidly. Don't I? Eleanor challenged, pressing her advantage. Continental Trust Compliance Department has flagged every single suspicious transaction. Michael, it's already been reported. The investigation is well underway. She's bluffing, Chloe said quickly, desperately trying to regain control. She just got back. She can't possibly know anything. Eleanor turned her gaze coolly to the blonde woman. I know enough. Elizabeth, or do you prefer Chloe these days? The color completely drained from Chloe's Elizabeth's face. What? What did you call me? Elizabeth Kaplan. Eleanor said clearly, distinctly. That is your real name, isn't it? Not Chloe Bennett. For a long moment, no one moved, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Then Michael recovered, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow and strained even to his own ears. This is ridiculous. Eleanor, you're just making wild accusations because you're upset about our relationship. Am I? Eleanor countered calmly. Then perhaps you can explain why Continental Trust's Internal Compliance Division has been building a detailed case against you for weeks? Explain why the FBI is involved. FBI? Elizabeth repeated, her voice barely above a terrified whisper. You're lying. Michael insisted desperately, but beads of sweat had begun to form on his forehead, his collar suddenly seeming too tight. Check your phone. Michael, Eleanor suggested calmly. I'm sure your contact at the bank has been trying desperately to reach you all evening. The transfers were flagged days ago. The formal investigation is already underway. Michael's hand moved involuntarily toward his pocket, confirming Eleanor's suspicion. This is absurd, Elizabeth declared, but her voice trembled uncontrollably now. David, she's manipulating you. Don't listen to her. How long have you two been planning this? Eleanor asked quietly, looking between the two crumbling conspirators. Was I always the intended target? Or did you just choose me after meeting Michael? Stop talking. Michael snapped, his eyes darting nervously towards the windows. The baby is a nice, convincing touch. Though, Eleanor continued relentlessly, gesturing towards Elizabeth's belly. Although, you might want to secure that prosthetic a little better next time. It shifted quite noticeably when you reached for the glass earlier. Elizabeth's hand flew protectively, instinctively, to her stomach, her eyes wide with panic and fury. You have no idea what you're talking about, she hissed, her voice venomous. Oh, I think I do, Eleanor replied calmly, unflinchingly. This isn't your first performance. Is it Elizabeth? Seattle? Miami? Boston? You've done this exact routine before. Elizabeth Kaplan's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled entirely. She turned frantically to Michael, raw panic evident in her expression. We need to leave. Now. Michael hesitated, his gaze flickering desperately between the incriminating documents on the table and his partner in crime. The papers, he began weakly. Forget the damn papers. Elizabeth snapped viciously. She knows. She said the FBI is involved. We need to go. The mere mention of federal law enforcement finally seemed to penetrate Michael's panicked hesitation. He grabbed his phone from the table, quickly scrolling through messages, his face growing paler by the second. How? How did you know? He demanded, looking up at Eleanor with a toxic mixture of anger and raw fear. You just got back. There's no way you could know about the accounts. You underestimated me. Michael, Eleanor said simply, her voice quiet but firm. And you underestimated the people who care about me. Michael's expression hardened again, desperation twisting his features. The documents. Eleanor, sign them. Just sign them. And we'll leave you alone. One signature. And this all goes away. It's far too late for that. Michael, Eleanor replied steadily. As I said, the investigation is already underway. She's lying. Elizabeth insisted again, though less convincingly than before. The authorities would be here by now if what she's saying was actually true. As if on cue, bright headlights swept across the front windows as multiple vehicles pulled abruptly into the driveway. Elizabeth rushed frantically to the window, pushing aside the heavy curtain. "It's too early," she whispered, her voice filled with rising dread. "They weren't supposed to be here until midnight." Michael joined her numbly at the window, his face draining of the little color it had left. "Who was coming at midnight?" "Michael?" Eleanor asked quietly, though she already suspected the chilling answer. "Movers for my remaining belongings? Or maybe someone to help facilitate those offshore accounts?" Neither Michael nor Elizabeth answered, both seemingly transfixed, paralyzed by whatever they were seeing outside. "It's over," Eleanor said quietly, definitively. "Whatever you were planning, it's done." Michael turned back to her, sheer desperation replacing his earlier arrogance and confidence. "Eleanor, listen to me. You don't understand what's happening. We can still work this out. Just sign the papers, and I'll explain everything." "I think you've explained quite enough already." "Michael," Eleanor replied coolly. A firm, authoritative knock sounded sharply at the front door, making all three of them jump violently. Elizabeth backed away instinctively from the window, her eyes darting around wildly, looking for an escape route. "The back door," she whispered urgently, desperately to Michael. "We can still get out." But Michael seemed frozen in place, reality finally, irrevocably crashing down around him. "They'll have the house surrounded," he said hollowly, his voice barely audible. Another knock, louder this time, more insistent, followed immediately by a firm, commanding voice. "FBI, open the door." The commanding voice from outside left absolutely no room for misinterpretation. "FBI, open the door. Now." Michael and Elizabeth remained frozen, raw panic starkly evident in their expressions. Eleanor, calm now despite the chaos, moved purposefully toward the front door. But Michael suddenly lunged forward, grabbing her arm roughly. "Don't," he hissed desperately. "We can still fix this." Eleanor wrenched her arm free with surprising strength. "It's over, Michael." Before anyone could react further, the heavy front door burst open forcefully. Four agents in official FBI windbreakers swarmed rapidly into the foyer, weapons drawn and held ready. "FBI, hands where we can see them," shouted the lead agent, a tall, composed woman with short dark hair and an air of intense focus. Michael raised his hands slowly, shakily, his face ashen. Beside him, Elizabeth did the same, though her eyes darted frantically around the room, still seemingly seeking an impossible escape route. "Eleanor Vance?" the female agent asked quickly, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "That's me," Eleanor confirmed, stepping forward calmly with her hands clearly visible. "Agent Cassandra Kim, FBI Financial Crimes Division," the woman said briskly, holstering her weapon as other agents moved swiftly to secure Michael and Elizabeth. "Are you all right, Mrs. Vance?" "I'm fine," Eleanor assured her, though fine seemed like a gross, almost laughable simplification of her current emotional state. Agent Kim nodded curtly, then turned her sharp attention to the other two people in the room, Michael Vance and Elizabeth Kaplan. "You're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit financial crimes, and attempted theft from a charitable foundation." As the agents began to handcuff Michael, he struggled briefly, desperately. "This is all a misunderstanding. Eleanor, tell them, this is just a messy divorce matter." Agent Kim ignored his frantic protests, continuing calmly to recite his Miranda rights as another agent secured his wrists firmly behind his back. The agent handling Elizabeth had a slightly more difficult, and certainly stranger time. As he attempted to cuff her, Elizabeth's prominent pregnant belly shifted dramatically, almost comically, to one side. Careful with that. Elizabeth snapped irritably. It's expensive. The agent paused, looking down at the clearly artificial prosthetic in confusion. Ma'am, I need you to remove that device. Elizabeth glared defiantly, but reached under her shirt with her still free hand, unfastening something at her back. The entire pregnancy belly came away easily in one piece, revealing her naturally slim frame underneath. She dropped the sophisticated, disturbingly realistic prosthetic onto the expensive hardwood floor with a dull thud. Eleanor stared at the discarded fake belly, even knowing intellectually that it wasn't real. Seeing the physical evidence of the elaborate deception was profoundly jarring, a tangible, grotesque symbol of the intricate web of lies that had been meticulously constructed around her. Agent Kim approached Eleanor while the other agents continued processing the now subdued Michael and Elizabeth. Mrs. Vance, I know this is a tremendous shock. We've been building this case quietly for several weeks based primarily on financial evidence. But we certainly weren't expecting to find you here tonight. According to our information, you weren't due back from Europe for another 3 weeks. I finished my work early, Eleanor explained, feeling oddly detached as she watched the surreal scene unfold in her own drastically altered living room. I wanted to surprise my husband. A flicker of genuine sympathy crossed Agent Kim's otherwise professional demeanor. Quite a surprise all around, it seems. We'll need to ask you some formal questions. Of course, but they can certainly wait until tomorrow if you prefer. No, Eleanor said firmly, needing clarity now more than rest. I want to understand what's happening. What exactly were they doing? Agent Kim gestured towards the dining table, with incriminating documents still lay scattered. May I? Eleanor nodded, and the agent carefully flipped through the papers with gloved hands. Based on our ongoing investigation, your husband and Miss Kaplan were attempting to gain complete control of your family's charitable foundation through these fraudulent documents. Agent Kim explained calmly. These papers contain numerous hidden clauses, expertly embedded in standard legal language, that would have granted them irrevocable signing authority over all Henderson Foundation accounts. They've already managed to illegally transfer over $3 million to various offshore accounts. But they needed your signature on these specific authorizations to access the bulk of the foundation's considerable assets, likely tens of millions more. Eleanor felt physically sick. And the divorce? Was that just part of the scheme too? The divorce itself appears to be legally real enough, Agent Kim confirmed grimly, but it was clearly expedited and structured entirely to their advantage. Had you signed these papers tonight under duress, you would have unknowingly surrendered not just your equitable share of marital assets, but complete administrative control of your family's foundation as well. From the foyer, Eleanor could hear Michael still protesting loudly as agents firmly led him toward the front door. Eleanor, don't listen to them. This is all just a huge misunderstanding. Elizabeth Kaplan, in stark contrast, remained coldly silent, her calculating eyes fixed intently on Eleanor with unmistakable, venomous hatred. How did you find them? Eleanor asked Agent Kim, needing to understand the timeline. Jessica, my friend, she said you were already investigating? We received an internal report several weeks ago from compliance officers at Continental Trust Bank regarding a pattern of suspicious wire transfers originating from the Henderson Foundation accounts. Agent Kim explained. The specific pattern immediately matched previous complex fraud cases involving Miss Kaplan. When we began discreet surveillance, we quickly discovered her connection to your husband. The agent picked up one of the documents from the stack, pointing to a particularly dense clause. This is especially sophisticated work. Mrs. Vance, The authorization for international wire transfers is cleverly embedded within standard divorce language pertaining to asset division and liability assumption. Most people, even many attorneys without specific expertise in financial fraud, wouldn't catch it without extremely careful legal review. Eleanor thought back to Michael's intense insistence that she sign immediately, tonight, without consulting her own attorney. The desperate urgency made sickening sense now. Were they working alone? Eleanor asked, remembering Elizabeth's mysterious phone checks and her panic comment about someone else coming at midnight. No, Agent Kim confirmed gravely. We've already identified at least 3 accomplices. 2 were apprehended attempting to approach the back of your property just as we entered the front. The 3rd, she paused as her radio crackled with an incoming transmission. After listening intently for a moment, she continued, has just been apprehended 3 blocks away, attempting to flee the area in a rented panel van. A van? Eleanor repeated, confused. Based on Kaplan's previous patterns, they likely plan to completely empty your home of valuables tonight. After securing your signature, Agent Kim explained grimly. Art, jewelry, electronics, silverware, anything easily transported and quickly sold on the black market. Eleanor glanced around her drastically altered home, seeing it now with new, horrified eyes. The bizarre redecorating hadn't just been about Elizabeth asserting dominance. It had likely been cold, calculated preparation for stripping the house bare of anything valuable. Agent Kim continued, her voice serious. Elizabeth Kaplan and her accomplices specifically target wealthy individuals, often those perceived as vulnerable or distracted, with access to significant family money or large investment accounts. They've successfully stolen upwards of $12 million across at least 3 states in the last 3 years alone, using sophisticated variations of this exact scenario. And Michael? Eleanor asked, her voice barely a whisper, though she already suspected the devastating answer. Was he just a victim too, initially? Agent Kim's expression hardened slightly, her professional mask firmly back in place. Initially, we considered the possibility that Mr. Vance might have been manipulated, perhaps unaware of Miss Kaplan's true intentions and extensive criminal history. However, electronic evidence recovered from his work computer and personal devices clearly shows he was a willing, even enthusiastic, participant once he fully understood the potential financial gain. The data indicates he's been actively assisting Miss Kaplan with the planning and execution of the fraud for at least the past 6 months. The cold confirmation of Michael's willing, active participation hit Eleanor like another physical blow. This wasn't just infidelity or a pathetic midlife crisis. It was calculated, predatory criminal behavior against his own wife and her family. I'd like to speak with your friend, Jessica Hayes, tomorrow as well. If possible, Agent Kim added gently, her timely alert to you, and subsequently to our office confirming your presence here, likely prevented much greater financial losses and possibly averted a more dangerous confrontation. Eleanor nodded numbly. Of course. As the agents firmly led Michael and Elizabeth outside to waiting unmarked vehicles, additional FBI personnel entered the house, beginning the meticulous process of documenting and searching the premises. One agent carried in a large evidence container. We'll need to process the scene thoroughly. Mrs. Vance, Agent Kim explained apologetically. It may take several hours, possibly through the night. Is there somewhere you can stay tonight? The irony wasn't lost on Eleanor. She was still being asked to leave her own home, just under vastly different and far more official circumstances than Michael and Elizabeth had planned just an hour earlier. I can call Jessica, Eleanor said quietly. Or maybe a hotel. Agent Kim nodded understandingly. Take whatever essential personal items you need for the night. We'll provide security for the property until our search is complete and the premises are secured. As Eleanor moved numbly towards the staircase to retrieve some essentials from the guest room where her things had supposedly been moved, she passed by one of the agents carefully placing the discarded prosthetic pregnancy belly into a large evidence bag. The agent looked up briefly as she approached. "We found 3 more of these upstairs, Agent Kim," he informed his superior officer. "Different sizes. Looks like they were documenting a progressive pregnancy over several months." Agent Kim nodded grimly. "Add them to the evidence log. And check the medicine cabinets thoroughly. There were likely fake prenatal vitamin bottles as well. Part of the staging." Eleanor continued upstairs to the guest room, where Elizabeth had casually mentioned her things had been moved. Opening the door, she found not her carefully packed belongings, but yet more chilling evidence of the elaborate, long-planned scheme. The room contained several expensive suitcases, stacks of fake identification documents spread across the bed, passports, driver's licenses, social security cards, and what appeared to be detailed offshore financial records. "Agent Kim," Eleanor called out, her voice trembling slightly. "You might want to see this." The agent appeared quickly in the doorway, surveying the damning contents of the room with practiced efficiency. "This is exactly what we were hoping to find," she said, immediately radioing for the evidence collection team. "Looks like they were preparing to flee the country very soon." Eleanor picked up a forged passport from the bed. It contained her husband's photograph, but bore a completely different name. Beside it lay 2 one-way plane tickets to the Cayman Islands, dated for the following week. They weren't just after the foundation money, were they? Eleanor asked quietly, the full horror of their plan finally sinking in. They were going to take absolutely everything. That's their usual pattern. Unfortunately, Agent Kim confirmed gravely. The foundation was likely the primary target because of its substantial liquid assets, but they wouldn't have stopped there. Based on what we've seen in previous cases, they likely would have emptied all your personal accounts, maxed out credit cards taken out fraudulently in your name, and taken absolutely anything of value from the property before disappearing without a trace. Eleanor set down the fake passport, feeling suddenly, overwhelmingly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the initial confrontation and the subsequent arrival of the FBI was rapidly ebbing away, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness unlike anything she had ever experienced. I think I'll call that hotel now," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Agent Kim nodded sympathetically. "One of my agents can drive you wherever you need to go. And Mrs. Vance," she added gently, "we'll need you to come into our office tomorrow morning for a formal statement. But I want you to know, you handled this incredibly difficult situation remarkably well tonight. Many people in your position would have understandably panicked." Eleanor managed a small, tired smile. "I think I'm saving the panic for later." As she was escorted carefully from the house, past agents meticulously cataloging evidence, past the very spot where Michael and Elizabeth had stood so confidently announcing their fabricated future together, just hours ago, Eleanor felt a profound sense of displacement. The home she had eagerly returned to tonight wasn't the one she had left 2 months ago, and the husband she'd loved and believed in for 8 long years had, perhaps, never really existed at all. Agent Kim walked her personally to a waiting, unmarked FBI vehicle. "We'll be in touch first thing tomorrow morning. Try to get some rest. Mrs. Vance." Eleanor nodded. Clutching the small overnight bag, one of the agents had helped her quickly pack with items that had been deemed safe to remove from the active crime scene. As the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, she looked back one last time at her house. Lights blazing from every single window, FBI agents moving purposefully in and out like shadows. Her familiar, beloved home, transformed instantly into a federal crime scene. "Where to, ma'am?" the agent driving asked gently from the front seat. Eleanor considered for a moment. Not the Four Seasons. The hotel Michael had so thoughtfully, so sinisterly researched for her. Not anywhere he had touched or planned or contaminated. The Peninsula Hotel. Please, she said finally, naming one of Chicago's most elegant establishments on North Michigan Avenue. As they drove away from the now tainted familiarity of her neighborhood, Eleanor's phone rang. It was Jessica. Eleanor, are you okay? Did they arrive? Yes, Eleanor confirmed, her voice steadier than she expected. They arrested Michael and Elizabeth. I'm headed to a hotel for the night while they process the house. Oh, thank God. Jessica breathed, relief evident in her voice. I've been so incredibly worried. Do you want me to meet you somewhere? You shouldn't be alone tonight. The simple, unwavering offer of friendship brought the first real tears of the evening stinging to Eleanor's eyes. Yes, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, I like that very much. The Peninsula Hotel suite offered a stark, almost surreal contrast to the chaos Eleanor had just left behind. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Chicago's glittering, indifferent skyline, the city lights reflecting like scattered jewels off the dark expanse of Lake Michigan in the distance. The elegant, impeccably designed room, with its serene neutral palette and understated luxury, felt like a much-needed sanctuary after the emotional maelstrom of the evening. Eleanor sat numbly on the edge of the king-sized bed, still clad in her rumpled travel clothes. As Jessica carefully poured them each a glass of wine from the room service delivery she had thoughtfully ordered ahead. The FBI agent seemed incredibly thorough, Jessica said, handing Eleanor a glass. Agent Kim, you said? Eleanor nodded, taking a grateful sip of the crisp Sauvignon Blanc. Cassandra Kim, Financial Crimes Division. She said they've been building this case for weeks. Ever since I flagged those suspicious transfers. Once I reported it, things apparently moved very quickly, Jessica explained, settling into a plush armchair across from Eleanor. Continental Trust has extremely sophisticated monitoring systems specifically for large foundation accounts. Michael must have known that, but he still tried to move the money anyway. He always was dangerously overconfident. Eleanor murmured, staring blankly into her wine glass, watching the pale gold liquid catch the soft lamplight. I keep trying to understand when it all started. When did my husband, the man I loved and trusted implicitly, become someone capable of this? Jessica's expression softened with deep sympathy. I don't think it's ever that simple. Eleanor, Agent Kim explained some of the psychology to me when I first reported the suspicious activity. People like Elizabeth Kaplan, they're extremely skilled manipulators. They identify potential marks, meticulously study them for weaknesses emotional, financial, situational, and then ruthlessly exploit those vulnerabilities. But still, Eleanor insisted, shaking her head, to go from just being unfaithful, which is bad enough, to actively committing complex, federal financial crimes. That's a significant, terrifying leap. Maybe, Jessica acknowledged gently, or maybe one seemingly small moral compromise just made the next one, and the one after that, progressively easier. She hesitated for a moment before continuing, her voice softer now. Eleanor, there's something else you should probably know. The initial investigation revealed that Michael had actually been accessing your personal financial accounts and attempting to probe the Foundation's security systems for nearly 2 years, long before Elizabeth Kaplan ever appeared on the scene. Eleanor felt a fresh, sickening wave of betrayal wash over her. 2 years? That's before I even started planning the European tour. Jessica nodded grimly. The FBI believes he may have been laying the groundwork for a while, just looking for opportunities. Then, When the Henderson Foundation received that major endowment last year, the Sutherland donation, Eleanor said numbly, remembering the elderly, eccentric art collector who had unexpectedly left a staggering $12 million to the Henderson Foundation upon his death. Michael organized the entire investment strategy for those funds. Exactly, Jessica confirmed, her expression pained. That sudden, massive influx of capital apparently created the opportunity they felt they needed, but they still ultimately required your signature or a legally binding power of attorney obtained under false pretenses for the major international transfers they were planning. Eleanor took another large sip of wine, trying desperately to process this latest, devastating revelation. So, the European assignment, the one Michael encouraged me so strongly to take, was that part of the plan all along? It certainly looks that way, Jessica replied gently, her heart aching for a friend. Agent Kim mentioned they found encrypted emails between Michael and Elizabeth explicitly discussing the perfect window of opportunity while you were scheduled to be overseas for an extended period. The remaining pieces continued falling sickeningly into place in Eleanor's shattered mind. And let me guess, she said bitterly, the timing of my return was supposed to coincide perfectly with the completion of their grand scheme? Jessica nodded sadly. Based on the evidence the FBI has uncovered so far, yes, they apparently planned to have all the necessary signatures secured and the final, largest transfers completed by sometime next week. You weren't supposed to be back until the week after that, by which time they, along with most of your personal assets and a significant portion of the Foundation's endowment, will have simply vanished. Eleanor set down her wine glass abruptly, suddenly feeling physically ill. All those calls, all those video chats from Europe. Michael always sounded so loving, so supportive, so genuinely interested in my work. Was any of it real? Jessica moved from the armchair to sit beside Eleanor on the edge of the large bed, placing a comforting hand gently on her shoulder. I can't answer that, Eleanor. No one can, except Michael himself. But I do know this, with absolute certainty, what happened tonight is not a reflection on you. You trusted your husband, because that's what people are supposed to do in marriages. You didn't fail some test of perception or intuition. You were targeted, manipulated, and betrayed by two deeply calculating criminals. A soft knock at the suite door interrupted them. Jessica rose quickly to answer it, returning a moment later accompanied by Agent Kim. I sincerely apologize for the late intrusion, the FBI agent said, remaining standing despite Eleanor's weary gesture toward a nearby chair. But we've uncovered some additional information I thought you should know tonight, rather than waiting until morning. Eleanor straightened instinctively, bracing herself for more potentially devastating revelations. What is it? The real Eliza Carlisle. Agent Kim began, using the alias Elizabeth Kaplan had apparently stolen, is a graduate student in Boston who reported her identity stolen approximately 8 months ago. Elizabeth Kaplan appears to have used her stolen identity to establish false credentials here in Chicago, including setting up a fake, high-end interior design business. Interior design? Eleanor repeated numbly, thinking of the jarring, unwelcome changes that had desecrated her beloved home. Agent Kim nodded. It provided a convenient cover story for her prolonged presence in your house and allowed her to oversee the subsequent alterations, likely assessing valuables as she went. But that's not the primary reason I'm here now. She hesitated briefly, her professional gaze softening slightly. Mrs. Vance, the evidence response team found several sophisticated, hidden cameras installed throughout your home. Eleanor felt her skin crawl. Cameras? For what purpose? Based on preliminary forensics analysis, they were installed approximately 7 months ago. Agent Kim explained carefully. The footage was being continuously uploaded and stored on a secure, encrypted cloud server, which we've now gained access to. It appears they were meticulously monitoring your daily routines, your private conversations, even potentially capturing sensitive financial discussions you might have had at home. 7 months ago, Eleanor echoed hollowly, while I was still living there, before I even left for Europe. Agent Kim nodded grimly. We believe Michael likely installed them at Elizabeth Kaplan's direction, as part of their extensive information gathering phase. These cameras provided them with disturbingly intimate knowledge of your life, your schedule, potentially even capturing passwords and financial details you may have discussed aloud or typed within view of the hidden lenses. The violation felt profound, invasive, somehow deeper and more personal even than the staggering financial fraud or the crushing marital betrayal. The idea that her most private, unguarded moments have been systematically surveilled, analyzed, and exploited by the man she had trusted most in the world was almost too much to bear. There's more, Agent Kim continued, her voice grave. Among the extensive digital evidence recovered from their devices was a detailed, multi-phase plan, what they chillingly termed Phase 3. She paused. Phase 1 appears to have been the initial information gathering and surveillance. Phase 2 was isolating you physically by encouraging the overseas trip, moving Kaplan in, liquidating joint assets, and attempting to obtain the necessary signatures under duress to access the foundation funds. Eleanor almost didn't want to ask. And Phase 3? Agent Kim's professional demeanor softened slightly with clear empathy. I tell you this not to frighten you further, Mrs. Vance, but so you fully understand the seriousness of the situation you've narrowly escaped tonight. Phase 3 involved a plan to immediately open multiple high-limit lines of credit fraudulently in your name, completely maxing out all your existing accounts. And she paused again, choosing her words very carefully and ensuring you would be in no position to effectively challenge their actions once the full scope of the fraud was eventually discovered. What does that mean? Exactly? Jessica asked quietly, when Eleanor remained utterly silent, unable to speak. They had prepared a significant amount of fabricated documentation suggesting Mrs. Vance was suffering from severe mental health issues. Agent Kim explained, her voice tight with controlled anger. Fabricated medical records, forged emails to a non-existent therapist allegedly from Mrs. Vance expressing paranoid thoughts and delusions. They were meticulously building a case to preemptively question her competency, her credibility, perhaps even attempt to have her institutionalized if she later tried to challenge the fraudulent transfers or report the theft. Eleanor felt a profound chill seep deep into her bones despite the warm, luxurious hotel room. They hadn't just planned to steal her money. They had actively prepared to systematically destroy her credibility, her reputation, possibly even her freedom. I know this is overwhelming, Agent Kim acknowledged softly, but I wanted you to have this crucial information tonight, because it underscores just how comprehensive and ruthless their planning truly was. This wasn't merely a crime of opportunity, or a relationship that simply went tragically wrong. It was a meticulously orchestrated, predatory fraud scheme from the beginning. And Michael? Eleanor asked, her voice barely audible, needing a final, painful confirmation. Was he fully aware of all of this? The cameras? The plan to discredit me? Agent Kim's expression confirmed the worst before she even spoke the words. The evidence we've recovered indicates he was an enthusiastic participant in all aspects of the plan. Mrs. Vance. In fact, she added grimly, some of the more aggressive elements of Phase 3, including the manufactured evidence of mental instability, appear to have originated directly with him, not Miss Kaplan. The final revelation landed like a physical blow, extinguishing the last faint, flickering ember of hope Eleanor might have subconsciously held onto the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, Michael had been manipulated, coerced, somehow not fully complicit in the most vicious parts of the scheme. What happens now? Eleanor asked after a long moment of heavy, suffocating silence. They'll both remain in federal custody, pending arraignment. Agent Kim explained calmly. Given the overwhelming evidence we've already secured, the significant flight risk they both represent, and the clear pattern of previous, similar crimes committed by Miss Kaplan, I anticipate the U.S. attorney will pursue substantial charges and request extremely high bail. If bail is granted at all, the prosecutor's office is already preparing the case. Will I need to testify? Eleanor asked quietly. Eventually, yes, Agent Kim confirmed. But we have substantial documentary, electronic, and surveillance evidence. Your testimony will certainly strengthen the case significantly, provide crucial context, but it's not the entirety of it by any means. After Agent Kim departed, promising further updates first thing in the morning, Eleanor and Jessica sat in silence for several long minutes. The crushing weight of these latest revelations settling heavily between them in the quiet luxury of the hotel suite. I don't even know who he was, Eleanor finally said, her voice breaking, the tears finally starting to fall freely. 8 years of marriage, and I never really knew him at all. Jessica moved closer, wrapping a strong, comforting arm around Eleanor's trembling shoulders. Maybe no one really did. Eleanor, maybe the person you thought you married. Maybe he never truly existed outside of the illusion he created. Eleanor leaned heavily into her friend's supportive embrace, finally allowing the grief, the anger, the sheer, overwhelming sense of violation she'd been holding back all evening to wash over her in waves of shuddering sobs. How do you even start over? She choked out between tears. When your entire life, everything you believed in, turns out to be built on a foundation of calculated lies? One day at a time, Jessica answered simply, holding her tightly, and you don't have to do it alone. As Eleanor cried helplessly in her best friend's arms, the magnificent Chicago skyline continued to glitter brightly beyond the panoramic windows, vast and indifferent to the intimate human drama unfolding within the opulent hotel room high above the city streets. Her life, as she knew it, had been utterly shattered tonight. But as the initial, paralyzing shock slowly began to recede, replaced by a deep, aching grief, Eleanor felt something unexpected stirring beneath the overwhelming pain and betrayal of quiet, steely determination beginning to take root. Michael and Elizabeth had profoundly underestimated her. They had mistaken her trust for naivete, her dedication to her career for neglect, her inherent kindness for weakness. They had calculated and schemed and lied, believing her too distracted, too trusting, perhaps simply too unimportant in their grand design to ever notice until it was far too late. But they had been wrong. 6 months later, the Anderson Gallery in downtown Chicago hummed with lively conversation and the gentle, celebratory clinking of champagne glasses. Bright spotlights meticulously illuminated a powerful, provocative series of mixed media pieces arranged thoughtfully throughout the expansive, modern space. Each artwork depicted themes of fragmentation, fractured houses, broken contracts, shadowy figures lurking in the background of seemingly perfect domestic scenes. At the vibrant center of the successful opening night exhibition stood Eleanor Vance, confidently greeting guests, gallerists, and critics, discussing her curatorial vision with poise and passion. Gone was the shell-shocked, devastated woman from that horrific April night. In her place stood someone visibly stronger, more focused, imbued with a quiet, hard-won confidence that radiated from within. The exhibition really challenges our fundamental assumptions about security, intimacy, and trust. Eleanor explained articulately to an influential art critic from the Chicago Tribune. Each participating artist explores the complex nature of deception from a different, deeply personal angle: financial fraud, identity theft, intimate betrayal, while simultaneously examining the arduous but essential process of how we rebuild, how we reclaim our narratives in the aftermath. In the title, the critic asked, gesturing towards the stark, minimalist lettering displayed prominently on the gallery wall, hidden in plain sight, the art of deception and recovery. It speaks to the dual nature of the exhibition. Eleanor replied thoughtfully. Both the insidious deception that often occurs right before our very eyes, unnoticed or willfully ignored, and the necessary recovery that must happen visibly, intentionally, and authentically to be truly complete. As the critic moved on to study a particularly powerful installation involving shredded financial documents and hidden surveillance equipment, Jessica appeared at Eleanor's side, offering a fresh glass of sparkling water. "Full house tonight." Jessica observed, beaming with pride. The early online reviews are already coming in. They're calling the show revolutionary, brave, and deeply cathartic. Eleanor smiled, a genuine warmth reaching her eyes. "It's not just my vision, Jess. Each of these incredible artists has personally experienced some profound form of betrayal or fraud in their own lives. I think that raw authenticity is what resonates so strongly with people." Speaking of which, Jessica said, lowering her voice slightly, "Agent Kim Cassandra just arrived. She said she has some news for you." Eleanor nodded, scanning the bustling crowd until she spotted the familiar figure of the FBI agent near the entrance. Looking professional, yet slightly out of place amidst the artistic gathering. Despite her elegant pantsuit, Eleanor excused herself graciously and made her way through the crowd. "Agent Kim," she greeted warmly, extending her hand. "I'm so glad you could make it." "Please, it's Cassandra now," the agent replied with a friendly smile, shaking Eleanor's hand firmly. "I'm technically off duty tonight. I genuinely wanted to see the exhibition and to give you an update in person." They moved together to a quieter corner of the gallery, where a sleek modern bench offered a brief respite from the crowded floor. The plea agreements have been finalized. Cassandra informed her directly. Michael accepted a deal late yesterday. 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft, with the possibility of parole only after serving a minimum of 10 years. In exchange for the reduced sentence, he's providing full testimony against Elizabeth Kaplan and their other known accomplices. Eleanor absorbed this significant information with a sense of calm detachment that would have been utterly impossible just 6 months earlier. And Elizabeth? She's still fighting it, refusing any deals, Cassandra replied, but with Michael's detailed testimony confirming our existing evidence and the mountain of forensic data we recovered, the prosecutor is extremely confident. She's likely looking at 20 to 25 years when all the charges from multiple jurisdictions are finally combined. Eleanor nodded slowly, feeling no particular joy, but a certain quiet sense of definitive closure. And the foundation money? Almost all of it has been successfully recovered or frozen, Cassandra confirmed reassuringly. The various offshore accounts have been legally seized, and the funds are currently being repatriated back to the U.S. The international paperwork is inevitably slow and complex, but the money is secure. It will be returned to the Henderson Foundation. That's what matters most, Eleanor said sincerely. Those funds were always meant to provide vital arts education programs to underserved communities. not to finance Michael and Elizabeth's escape to a life built on theft. There's something else, Cassandra added carefully. Through the ongoing investigation into Kaplan's network, we've now identified 3 more victims from her previous scams in other cities. They weren't as fortunate as you, Eleanor. They lost nearly everything: homes, savings, reputations before the full extent of the fraud was discovered. The prosecutor wondered if you might possibly be willing to speak with them at some point. Perhaps help them navigate their own recovery process. Your strength throughout this ordeal has been truly remarkable. Eleanor considered the request thoughtfully. 6 months ago, she might have instinctively wanted to put as much distance as humanly possible between herself and anything even remotely connected to the crime that had so completely upended her life. But now, having channeled her harrowing experience into this powerful exhibition, into creating something productive, meaningful, and potentially healing for others, the idea of helping fellow survivors felt unexpectedly right, almost necessary. I'd be happy to, she agreed without hesitation. Perhaps they'd even be interested in contributing their stories, or their own creative work, to the next phase of this exhibition as well. We're planning to expand it next year to include workshops focused specifically on recovery and rebuilding after financial and emotional trauma. Cassandra smiled, clearly impressed by Eleanor's resilience and forward-thinking generosity. I'll certainly let them know. Thank you, Eleanor. As the agent departed to view the rest of the exhibition, Jessica rejoined Eleanor. Everything okay? She asked softly. Eleanor nodded, taking a deep breath. The legal proceedings are finally wrapping up. Justice, or some form of it, is being served. She glanced around the crowded gallery, at the powerful, resonant artwork and the engaged, thoughtful visitors. But this, she gestured around the room, this feels more important somehow. Turning pain into purpose, Jessica observed quietly. Exactly, Eleanor agreed, a determined glint in her eyes. Michael and Elizabeth tried their best to destroy my life, my career, my reputation, but they inadvertently gave me a completely new direction, a stronger voice, and a deeper purpose instead. Later that evening, as the last guests finally departed and the gallery staff began their closing procedures, Eleanor stood alone before the final, commanding peace in the exhibition, a powerful, deeply personal mixed media work she had created herself in the months following the ordeal. The central image depicted a house literally split in two, one half rendered in pristine, idealized perfection, the other half revealing hidden cameras, document shredders, and false bottoms concealed within drawers. Layered throughout the complex piece were actual fragments of the fraudulent legal documents Michael and Elizabeth had tried to force her sign, now rendered harmless, transformed into potent art materials. The FBI had permitted her to use redacted versions for the project after all the original evidence had been fully processed and logged. At the very bottom of the piece, barely visible unless one looked closely and intentionally, was a small, carefully inscribed inscription, "The truth will out." Eleanor gathered her things, preparing to leave. The beautifully renovated industrial loft she now called home awaited her a space entirely her own, decorated with items she had mindfully chosen herself, secured with a state-of-the-art security system Cassandra Kim had personally recommended. Her phone chimed softly with a text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Vance? This is Claire from Seattle. Agent Kim gave me your contact information. I was one of Elizabeth Kaplan's victims 3 years ago. I saw the online coverage of your exhibition. It looks incredible. If your offer to connect with other survivors is genuine, I will be so grateful. Some days, I still feel like I'm drowning in the aftermath." Eleanor read the poignant message twice, her heart aching with empathy for the stranger who shared a similar scar. Then, she quickly composed a reply. "Claire, thank you so much for reaching out. The offer is absolutely genuine. That drowning feeling, it does eventually subside. I promise. Let's meet for coffee next week. In the meantime, please know you're not alone in this journey." After sending the message, Eleanor put away her phone and took one last long look around the quiet gallery. 6 months ago, she had returned home to find her life completely shattered by unimaginable betrayal and calculated deception. Tonight, she was leaving a space she had intentionally filled with newfound meaning, resilience, and profound human connection. It wasn't the life she had planned, not by a long shot, but as she stepped out into the cool, crisp Chicago evening, Eleanor Vance realized, with a deep sense of clarity and purpose, that it might just be something even better, a life built not on blind trust or fragile illusions, but on clear-eyed strength, hard-won wisdom, and the authentic, unshakable resilience that comes only through surviving the unimaginable. This incredible story serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes the people closest to us can hide the darkest secrets, and navigating the path to truth can be harrowing. Eleanor Vance's journey from devastating betrayal to profound empowerment showcases the remarkable resilience of the human spirit. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story in the comments below. Have you ever discovered someone in your life wasn't who they claimed to be? How did you, or someone you know, manage to rebuild trust and find strength after deception? If you found this story compelling and want to hear more incredible true accounts of deception, justice, and human resilience, please subscribe to our channel and be sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light.